this week on the Navigating Personal Growth podcast.
Because it's not really the birth date or the death date of someone that we celebrate. It's what happens in the middle. And that dash is so individually personal.
Hey Navigators, I'm your host Brooke Plack here today on the Navigating Personal Growth podcast, and I'm so excited you're here with me today, and we are going to debunk the American way of life today on the podcast. So if it's your first time joining us, welcome. We like to talk on this podcast about navigating through life and navigating through leadership and learning as we go. So if you're returning, welcome back. Be sure that you follow or subscribe our podcast as it helps us get our message out to more people like you and listeners who need to hear the truth about life. So today we can thank my dear old dad, Rodney Plack, for being the inspiration or maybe the de-inspiration for today's episode. So he was in town this week for my son Crew's kindergarten graduation. We have a little graduate in the house. I know, I can't believe it. He'll be headed to first grade before we know it. And so Dad comes to the house today. He lives about 3 hours away, so he's not here very often. And he goes outside to look at my garden, and it is, really cute. And got all these little garden boxes with my plants in them, and it's filled with crushed granite around it and a nice little border. So it's like all neat and tidy, like almost Pinteresty cute garden. And he mentions how my plants are struggling and they should be further along growing this time of year. And once he gets home, he sends me a picture of his growing, blossoming tomato plants and how good they look. And, I have had a caterpillar issue. And so I killed the caterpillar and squish and the guts went everywhere in my paper towel and got rid of the caterpillar. So it did damage some of my plants. But after he sends me this picture, I'm a recovering perfectionist. And so I could have been really hard on myself and disappointed. But you know what? I realized that it's not a race and it's not a competition with my dad or with anyone else. And for him, it probably is a race or a competition because he's in the car business. He was a car salesman growing up and runs a huge car dealership in Northwest Arkansas. And so I get it. For him, everything might be a race and it might be a competition. But you know what? For me, it's not, because gardening is not a competition. It's a hobby for me. But in life, everyone's garden is different. And I'm a crunchy organic gardener, and my dad is a 7-Dust Miracle Grow gardener, and he only grows tomatoes, and I grow all kinds of different plants. I have flowers, I have vegetables, I have herbs. And is his garden better than mine? Is my garden worse than his? I think it depends on your goals. Do you want big, red, shiny tomatoes, or do you want to have a variety of vegetables in your garden? Right? Are you a tomato gardener? Are you a flower gardener? Or are you a little bit of both there in the middle? And so for me, this story was and so is life. So is life. Everyone's garden is different, but you know what else? Everyone's life is different. And everyone's garden is not full of red, shiny tomatoes. And everyone's garden is not full of a variety of flowers and herbs and plants. And our hopes and our dreams and our goals are so deeply personal. And none of it is a race. But so many times we get into a rut. Are you ready for it? Of comparison. And viewing life as a race, as if there is some miraculous finish line, is just a means to a dead end, because it's not. Life is really about what I like to call the dash. And that is from a poem written by Linda Ellis. And so if you've never heard this poem, you are in for a treat today and maybe a bit of a tearjerker. Okay, so this poem is called The Dash. I'm going to read it to you. And if you're listening and you want to be able to refer to it later, we'll be sure and link it in the show notes too. I read of a man who stood to speak
at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of birth, and he spoke the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time that they spent alive on earth. And now only those who love them know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that can still be rearranged. If we could just slow down enough to consider what's true and real and always try to understand the way other people feel and be less quick to anger and show appreciation more and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering this special dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogy is being read with your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you spent your dash? Oh, read that poem years ago, and it always left an imprint on my heart because it's not really the birth date or the death date of someone that we celebrate. It's what happens in the middle. And that dash is so individually personal. And it's not a race and it's not a competition. But that dash is truly what defines your story. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that after we take a break in the podcast to do one of my favorite segments, Trivia in the Trenches. And today's trivia is really fun because I have a cool story to go along with it. Okay, you ready? What vehicle was driven by Bo and Luke Duke? The General Lee. Dun, 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 dun. I know. The Dodge Charger, the General Lee. I feel like it is like an epic 70s and 80s icon. And so I have actually seen a real General Lee. So notice I didn't say the real General Lee. So my friend Elizabeth and I traveled to Holden, Louisiana, and there is an entire compound there that is dedicated to Dukes of Hazzard, and one of the approximately 300 General Lees is there on the property, and one of the Dukes of Hazzard, he lives there on the property, and they have all these little Airbnb cabins and a big giant pool, and it is such a cool piece of property. So we will link the Airbnb in the show notes in Holden, Louisiana. Another fun fact about the General Lee, approximately 3 General Lees were destroyed every single episode of the filming of the Dukes of Hazzard. I know. So if you see General Lees like around the country, which you will when you travel in the South some, almost all of them are probably actually ones that came from the show because there were like 300 of them. So there's your fun facts and trivia and a travel tip because we had so much fun on that trip to Holden, Louisiana. All right, back to what we were talking about. So I want you to assume for a second that what I'm saying is right. Okay, that life is not actually a race. So if life is not actually a race, then what is it? So somewhere in my mid-20s, I began to realize that there was no destination. This side of humanity, there is no destination. It's like we rush to graduate high school, to rush off to college, to rush to find a job, to rush to get married, to rush to get divorced, to rush to go to graduate school, to rush to get remarried, to rush to get another degree or another job, to end up divorced, to hurry and have kids, and so on and so on and so on. And the people we love start to die, and it's like a big rat race. And I started to realize in my mid-20s, in the middle of all of those things that happen in my life, where am I going? There is no place that you're going to get there and be like, oh, I did it. It's all good. everything's good. Everything's fine. No one's sick. No one's dying. No one's chaos. No one needs to be picked up. No one forgot something. That's not going to happen. And you hear so many people in life say, well, when Christmas gets over, well, when we get done with vacation, their life is right now. Your dash is right now. And you don't know how long that dash is. And so any time that we spend trying to race through life or let that devil of comparison creep in is stealing away the time that we have in that dash. And maybe you see yourself in my description of what my 20s looked like. Or maybe there's another way that you're racing through life. But I encourage you to think about, what if there is no ultimate destination this side of humanity? And to acknowledge that you are the one holding the pen to your life. So if your life is a dash and there's a story in there, who's writing it? Are you letting the craziness and chaos write it? Or are you taking ownership for your journey? Are you stopping to see the birds and smell the roses and enjoy that good book and taste that great glass of wine and be present during the appetizer portion of your dinner and not checking your emails? What is it that's keeping you from writing your story? Because you are the one that ultimately get to determine that. There is no one exact person that's the perfect comparison for you in your life. We can learn from our ancestors. We can learn from history. We can learn from mentors in our life. We can learn from those right in front of us. But comparing yourself to that person you went to high school with that you haven't seen since you graduated, it's a thief. It's stealing your joy. If I sat there and compared my imperfect, messy garden to my dad's perfect tomato plants, I would not have the perfect tomato garden. Because you know what? I didn't just plant tomatoes. And if he wanted cantaloupes and cucumbers and potatoes and onions to come from his garden, he's a failure. Because you know what? He didn't plant them. So what is it that you're planting in your life that you're wanting? Because if you're wanting something out of your life, financial freedom, peace, a decluttered home, are you planting those things right now? Are you doing the work to cultivate that growth that you're looking for? Are you just complaining that you only have tomatoes when you never planted marigolds in the first place? Realizing that there is no race, there is no perfect comparison, that this is your life, your journey, and your garden of life is going to grow just how you plan it. And it's okay if yours looks totally different than someone else's. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to the Navigating Personal Growth podcast. I'm Brooke Plack. Join me again next week on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. This podcast is produced by ClantonCreative.com.